Hiya Kevin, and thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Now, I know some people might be familiar with your name, maybe from the mystery client investigations that you were very heavily involved with last year, looking into pills by post, home or DIY abortions. But some people might have also heard your name from one or two of the interviews about your work with Mary Stokes some years ago. So I thought it would be useful today because obviously those two things in a lot of people's minds certainly won't seem to marry up. So I think it would be useful maybe if we could just go back a bit and hear a little bit of your backstory into how you came to be involved with either of those two. So maybe if we just start off by going back to your childhood growing up, did you have any pro-life beliefs or any faith? I mean, where would you have grown up to start with? Where is your childhood? Where would that?
So we grew up in Pamela and I in Northern Ireland, in Ballymena. And it was a bit of a mixed thing, but in terms of faith, I became a Christian. It was a very definite thing for me when I was 15, 16. And the church that we were involved in those early years, I think even in that sort of time of Northern Ireland, this was the late mid 70s and coming into the early 80s. There was definitely a pro-life movement at that point in time. So it was very clear that abortion was something that was not good and something to be avoided.
And would that have been something that you'd been taught as a child? Did you?
No, it was never anything that was talked about at home. We would never have addressed anything like that at home.
But would you have considered yourself to be pro-life back then, or was
I would never have thought about it.
Not thought about it.
Never thought about it. So until it was raised in that sort of church setting, when I was maybe 18, 19, whatever.
Right.
Maybe in my first year at university. The sort of thing that got talked about a little bit, but that would have been my first sort of thing, and then it was quite clear, then it would be, well, no, why would you do that? That would not be a good thing to do. But I think once we got out of university, it wasn't anything that ever came up again. Right until I found myself in Africa, in Uganda.
So okay, what would have been the work that you were involved in prior to you taking up your position at Mary Stokes, and what would have been the job immediately before that? That wasn't financial services, was it?
Well, no. So I did the financial services, and I sat in many different positions. Sales, and then in head office, and directing new business ventures. So Scottish Widows, it was Scottish Widows Bank and their connections with Tesco in those days and things like that. With Prudential, it was outsourcing to India as the sort of thing that it's the thing in the year 2000 or whatever. But in about 2005, 2006, I met up again with a friend, a doctor, who'd gone out to Uganda and had set up a hospital group. He was actually, he had a number of clinics, and he was building a new hospital in Kampala. And the conversation went along the lines of, well, why don't you come out and see what I'm doing? And I did. And I mixed that for 2 years. I was working with Wesley in Birmingham here, and took 3 trips a year for 2 years, where I would go out to Uganda. I remember one time I was towards the end of my time in working in Uganda. I had at that time 10 primary healthcare clinics, and I needed some more to provide to my clients in the eastern corridor of Uganda. And I had this conversation with Mary Stokes, with the leadership team, and they had clinics there, and thought, well, let me go and see those clinics with you, and if I'm happy, then maybe we could do a deal where you look after my clients in that region, and we'll pay you a decent rate for it, but I would get a good deal, people I could trust, etc., etc. But when I came back and I presented this to my executive team, now by this time I'm chief executive, my executive team are all Ugandan nationals. The doctors, the nursing manager, the finance person, the HR person, the marketing person, all sat around the table. And I said, I've got a great deal. 3 more clinics. It's a good answer because now we can land these other clients that we were looking to do business with. And they said, who's it with? And I said, with Mary Stokes. And it was silence in the room. And I'm thinking, what's going on here, you know? And nobody would really engage on it. So I just closed the meeting and said, I'll talk to you all one by one. And one by one, I went to them and said, look, what's the issue here? And they said, it's Mary Stokes. And I said, yes. I mean, they do lots of things, yes, but they do that thing. What thing? They do that thing, don't they? The abortion thing. And we don't want to be associated with that. You know, we don't want our brand linked with their brand because that's all they're known for. And I said, no, they do. They have a maternal health program, they do contraception, they do primary health care, which is what we're after, and they do the abortion. And I could not convince my national team to join, to actually do business with Mary Stokes.
But what about for yourself then? Did you have any feelings of discomfort about the fact that even you knew that they did do abortions?
No, because at that time, what I was beginning to buy into was this concept of harm reduction. And I knew abortion was illegal. I looked closely enough at that. But I thought at that point in time that, well, women were having abortions anyway, and they're having them in a way that's not safe. They're perhaps not going to a clinic, they're trying to do it with unsafe methods, and there's a lot of harm in that. There's, you know, these women are ending up bleeding or having complications, sometimes losing their life as a result. So actually, if there is somebody providing abortion in a way that is safe and clean and effective, then isn't that a good thing? And that was this, you know, that's the whole approach to harm reduction and this safe abortion that they talk about.
So at some point then you changed from just working alongside Mary Stokes to actually being employed by them.
Yeah, that's right. So so I'd done 5 years as well, and it was time, you know, I was living and working in Uganda during those 5 years, and it was time really to go back and get back to the UK. And as I was beginning that process of leaving and thinking about what I'm going to do next, the team in Uganda from Mary Stokes, the Mary Stokes Uganda, said, look, there are opportunities, there are new jobs being, a couple of new roles being created, and you would be ideal for one of those. It would be of interest to you. Why don't you meet the people in London and have a chat with them when you go back? And that's what I did. And they had a new role, which was to help direct and manage the programs right across East and Southern Africa. So this was a way for me to go back to the UK, live there again, work a bit in London, but still have this travel back and forward to Africa and keep my hand in the sort of healthcare sector. And yes, I knew what Mary Stokes did, but you know, as I said, there were, you know, at that time I was thinking, well, there's reasons why that needs to be done.
So that was the position that you took then?
I was offered the job, and at the very start of 2013, took the role as their program director for East and Southern Africa, yes. And I remember one Sunday after church, in, you know, the coffee time, as it were, and mingling, and this couple came across me and said, oh, I haven't seen you, Kevin, in ages, you know, what are you doing now? And I said, I'm still working in Africa. Oh, who are you working with? And I said, with Mary Stokes. And it was just stony silence. It was very awkward.
Right.
And in my head, I'm thinking, you're judging me now. Okay, you're thinking I'm doing the wrong thing. This is a terrible thing. And I shouldn't, you know. And it was just really awkward. And it was awkward for me, obviously, but it was awkward, I'm sure, for them too. They didn't know how or what to say. For them, Mary Stokes was this one thing, and why was I involved with Mary Stokes? Okay. And so I just got used to not saying anymore. And I invariably then, when I met people, depending on how well I knew them or whatever, it was like I never talked about, I never named who I worked for. If I got into any detail, it was quite nice that I was able to talk about Oh, actually, I've just been to Bangladesh, and I've been visiting the maternity hospitals there. And there's 6 hospitals, and this is what they do, and there's so I was talking to the,
rather than mentioning anything to do
and
with
it was
the
all
abortion
about
side of
deliveries,
it.
and it was about the babies, and because it was easy to talk about.
Yeah.
Or you would talk about contraception, because it's sort of easy to talk about for some people, but never the other thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know when I've often talked to members of staff at abortion facilities, they'll often remind me, oh, we do other things as well, as though they even themselves sense some sort of discomfort with the abortion side of it and are keen to kind of look at the other aspect.
Yeah, and that's what we keep telling ourselves as well, but it's not true. Well, if we do, like Mary Stokes do other things in the UK and overseas, and Planned Parenthood say the same thing in the US and so on. But it's not what they're there for. The core business, the core service, and we even called it that, the core service is abortion.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the thing that we look to do more of, the numbers that we count, okay, it's all about abortion. Okay. Mary Stokes is quite clear. They want to double the number of abortions they're providing. They've doubled over the last 5 or 6 years. They want to get to 10 million per year by 2030. They're currently at about 4.5, 5 million per year, so they want to double again. And they can only do that over the counter. 80%, more than 80% of what they will be doing or are doing is pills where the women are basically on their own, managing it themselves. Now, apart from it not being safe, my other worry with that and concern from a professional point of view, as it were, it's not legal.
Right.
So, certain aspects of abortion in some of those countries, yes, to save the life of the mother, or sometimes for rape or incest or whatever. But providing abortion pills over the counter in a pharmacy without a prescription is not legal. And yet that's what Mary Stokes and Planned Parenthood and others are doing. So
what about what was going on in your heart then? You
I think
said you had
that,
a faith.
yeah, I think so. I think that in the last year or more, probably last year or so, that's when I just sensed, look, I don't know if I really want to be doing this anymore. Okay, is it really something that I, as a Christian, should be doing? What was the impact it had on me and my faith and my walk with God? And I think looking back was that there was definitely this separation. It was like I had sort of chosen to distance myself because of those awkward situations, and then because I was working in Africa and traveling so much anyway, it was easy not to go to church at the weekend and just drift apart. And I realized that I'd sort of moved away a little bit. And so I just made that commitment to God. One day, I'm stopped. I'm finished. I'd finished an assignment. I was doing some other work for a different client. And I said, that's it. I'm done. And I won't do it again. And I don't know what I'm going to do now. I'll go and do something else, okay? But I'm not doing that anymore. To the point where then, I think it's only, as these things invariably, God does this anyway. 2 or 3 days later, I think I got a phone call saying, Kevin, we've got a job, can you come and do it? And I said, no. And I think then I wasn't really prepared. I think I just said it was something like conflict of interest or something like that, and didn't really get into, I didn't tell them I thought it was all wrong or anything like that. I just said, no, actually, I'm busy or a conflict of interest, but I turned the work away. And for me, at that point in time, that was 2 years ago, I thought that was it. And for 2 years, I've probably been there. In my head, in my heart, I've been saying, look, I thought I heard God at that point saying, don't do this. This is not something you as a Christian, Kevin, should be involved in anymore. Okay, you need to stop it. You need to move away and do something else. And I did that. And I thought that was me being obedient, and it was done. And it was there. It was past, and I was now going here. Okay. Until very recently. And just thinking about it again, helpful situation with a few other people, I realized, no, there's more to it than that, okay? And it wasn't a question of regret, and at that point, do I regret it, do I not regret it? It wasn't a question of, do I feel forgiveness? Forgiveness wasn't an issue for me, it was done, it was sorted, okay? But I just felt I'd never gone back to this, 8 years before, to that December 2012 when I started making that decision. And I realized that I had been told at that point in time that this was not the right thing to do. And I'd gone ahead and done it.
Really?
And I think that I needed to get there. I needed to get to the point where I realized I made the wrong decision. It was the wrong thing for me to be involved in. I thought, you see, now that everything's good and I'm doing other things, isn't it nice that God's brought me to this point? And that's all past and it's forgiven. But I'd never gone back and acknowledged that actually, no, this was a mistake. And it was a mistake for me to take the job and work for Mary Stokes to start with. And it was a mistake every day for 6 years when I turned up and kept doing the same thing. And it's not something that we should be involved in as Christians. You can't have that, okay? That's what I've come to realize, and there's a time to walk away from it, but there's also a time to acknowledge I got it wrong. I made a bad decision, some sinful decision, whatever words you want to put to it, but it was wrong for me. And it was wrong for me in my walk with God at that point in time. And God, through somebody else, had said to me quite clearly, this is not the right thing for you. And I had said in my head, he doesn't really understand. He doesn't really know what Africa's like, and he doesn't really understand what this is all about, and I'm going to do it anyway.
So what would you say to yourself back then with the questions that you put up? Well, it's safer, surely it's better to have an abortion in this environment than something in the back streets. What would you have said to yourself back then with the questions that you were, or the excuses you were putting forward?
I think somebody would, somebody should, or I could, that was me having a conversation with myself. Okay, I think I would have to address, the beginning of life, the sanctity of life, how God sees that, okay, and is it really ever the right choice, okay, for a woman and for her family at that point in time, and it's not really about safe abortion versus backstreet. I mean, what's the difference as well anyway between backstreet and over the counter and managing the pills at home yourself anyway? There's not really a difference.
This is the irony, isn't it? We've come full circle.
Okay, right, okay.
Whether it's Africa or here in the UK.
Okay. I mean, people are not using sharp instruments and they clothes hanger, the wire clothes hanger that you see. They're not doing that anymore. It's the tablets. But it's not, that's where we are. So I would have to say, look, there's never a right time. There's never a good time. It's never a right decision for if you're a person of faith, if you have a walk with God as a Christian, this is not something you should be involved in.
Do you think there's anything that you could say to people who maybe don't have a faith? Do you think does it just come down to a faith issue for those people, whether they're working in the abortion industry or just someone on the outside?
No, I don't think it is a faith thing. I think that there is a health aspect to it. There is a science aspect to it. So if you really want to just look at the science of the whole thing, okay, then this issue of when does life begin? We know so much more now than we did, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Okay, science has moved on, ultrasound has moved on, all these things have moved on. And it's quite clear, we agree that, at conception something happens, and that's the beginning of life. And at that point, you've got this unique, whole, living human. I remember, and it's a difficult thing for people to hear, but if you're working in the abortion industry, it doesn't matter whether you're actually in the procedure room performing the abortion, or if you're thousands of miles away in the London office and you are a donor type person and you're writing reports, or you're a finance person balancing the books, or whatever you're doing, you're actively involved. You're involved the whole way through. Okay, that's what the organisation is doing. And what we do is we kill babies. And
so you don't think that someone could argue that in the right setting, in the right way?
No, because what you're doing is you're ending that life. So I think once you've got across that line and you realise that, okay, this is a life that you're ending, and there's value to that life, and it's where do you put the value? And the value can't just simply depend upon whether the woman wants the pregnancy or doesn't want the pregnancy.
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's what's going on, and it flips on that, and it's like some sort of magic happens. Okay, she wants it. It's a baby, and it's loved from the very first moment. Okay, all those early pictures you see of the sonograms and all the rest of it. Okay, right, and it's always talked about as the baby, and that's wanted. Unwanted, no. This is a clump of cells. It's etc. etc. Okay, and it doesn't have a value, and it doesn't have any rights, any value. Okay, for me that's the lie that's told, and you can't have either. It has value or it doesn't have value. Okay, and it can't flip on whether the woman and her doctor, as it were, choose one way or the other. That for me, that's the.
So from what you're saying, then you know, however remotely somebody is involved in that, then there's still going to be some culpability if you're the person answering the phone for the abortion centre, if you're the person who's supplying the money for the abortion. These are all complicit in some way.
If you work for Mary Stokes International, or for BPAS in the UK, it doesn't matter what job you've got. The organisation you work for has one aim, and with Mary Stokes, that's what I'm talking about. With Mary Stokes, it is to increase the number and the ease by which women can have abortions. That's it. And they will talk about other things, but that's it, right? Yeah. And for me, it's very clear. You may not be adjacent to that. You may not be, right in, approximate in the procedure room from an ethical point of view. You might be sitting back in the London office, but you are supporting that. You are enabling that. If you're talking to donors, if you're balancing the books, if you're the HR person doing recruitment, if you're writing manuals, if you're doing whatever, okay? Yeah. If you are the mobilizer in Uganda, mobilizing women to attend, or you are involved, okay? And you are complicit in the whole thing. I tell you, I mean, the one thing that got it from me, I had this thing where I thought from a faith perspective, okay, so life begins at conception. That's what we believe, isn't it? Okay, that's when life begins, at that point. But when do you put value on that life? And I could never get a straight answer to that. I asked lots of people around my church connections where never different really thing. It's this, and Aquinas said this, and it's tampons, when the baby moves, or at the implantation, or these different. I'm thinking, it just doesn't do it for me. I need something more than that. And it came from this story of Mary and Elizabeth. Okay, and for me, that's what I now hold to. Okay, this is my perspective on it. Okay, when God the Father and God the Son are talking about Jesus coming to earth, how did Jesus come? And he could have come in so many different ways. He could have come as an adult man in the desert, wise man, okay, an Elijah type, or John the Baptist type, or whatever, okay. He could have come like Moses in the basket, a baby in the basket, okay. He could have just appeared like that. But no, Jesus came from the point of conception. And that's about, him coming as to represent our personhood, our humanity, okay, from that point forward, okay. That's the part of the importance. And Mary, when she says yes, immediately goes to see, is it her sister or her cousin?
Yeah,
cousin.
Yeah.
So I knew it wasn't sister, cousin. I need to go back to church in Sunday school. Her cousin Elizabeth. And so, not far into her pregnancy, okay, she's visiting Elizabeth, and you have that story in the New Testament where the baby John in Elizabeth's womb leaps. There's this movement, and there's this, that narrative that goes on where Elizabeth recognizes her Lord, the mother of her Lord, okay. And so there's something about recognizing the baby Jesus in Mary's womb, being recognized by Elizabeth, an aunt, I suppose, okay, and by the not born yet John in the womb, and this story goes. And for me, that's part of God's story in the whole thing. So yes, Jesus came from conception, not from being a baby in the manger or whatever, or later, But from that, so that has to be important. There has to be a reason for that. Okay, conception for it. What I've realized, it's been a pleasure in the last couple of years meeting some people of strong Catholic faith in all of this again. Okay, and I realized that the whole thing about Mary and as Protestants we used to grow up and think, oh, Mary's something, and we tried to avoid that whole thing of Mary and worshipping Mary and all that sort of stuff. That's what we thought Catholics did, But I realize now that the slight difference is that when we talk about the nativity, when we talk about Jesus coming, we talk about it from baby Jesus in the manger.
Right.
And the story starts then. And what I realized, no. It starts when Mary says yes at that point. And for me, that's part of this now. That's part of, God could have done it in so many other ways. That's how he chose to do it. And if that is how he chose to do it, then who are we to say that life can be ended for no reason other than it's just inconvenient, it's not wanted, the circumstances are not right, okay, when there's always a better way.
Absolutely, Kevin. Couldn't have put it better myself. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and for all the work that you're doing with the pro-life movement and just with sharing your story. It's such a powerful testimony and a real insight into why people can work in the abortion industry and also the potential, I think, of every single person, whether it's somebody who's post-abortive, somebody who's worked in the abortion industry. We can see now the skills that you've got and how amazingly you're using them.
Well,
so
thank you for those kind words.
Much.
Thank you, and thank you for asking me today. It's been great.
An absolute pleasure.
Good.
All right, thank you.
God bless.